Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us today. We have our Dr. Kavita Berger and Stephen Moss from the National Academies. Kavita is currently the director at the National Academies of Science, Engineering, and Medicine for the Board of Life, right?
The Board of Life Sciences.
The Board of Life Sciences. She's been a principal investigator at Griffin Scientific. She was also at the at AAAS for many years, and her areas of research are have focused on laboratory biosecurity, biosafety, and the concepts that as they are applied within the Middle East and North Africa. And that's one area that she and I have in common. Stephen is he's a program officer at NAS, and his areas of focus are usually within the biology, chemistry, and the promotion of convergent research. And that's an area that is growing tremendously now that everyone recognizes we cannot stovepipe. We've got to have an interdisciplinary, not only an interdisciplinary approach, but from a convergence, that we are looking to see the implications of one on the other. Mm-hmm. So thank you. Today we're going to talk about how the influence of one, not just one person, but as you're bringing together different communities, different disciplines, and different organizations as we are trying to communicate quantum literacy, and the quantum concepts within the everyday life, so that we are moving from we're moving it from the classroom to the everyday life, to community, and that you have all of the stakeholders appreciating the impact of quantum, the implications of quantum, and the innovation that it can bring not only to their lives, but to this global impact that it can actually have. So with that in mind, if you can just talk a little bit about the work you do, just to kind of introduce yourselves beyond what I've said. We'll start with Stephen.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Denise. One of the things that I've really been focused on, as you mentioned, is the convergence of different research fields, specifically thinking about mathematical and physical sciences and computing sciences within the life sciences, and how they're starting to, how the life sciences is shifting, the landscape of the life sciences is shifting. Mm-hmm. And in that theme, one of the topics that came up recently is that we had a workshop related to the future of using quantum science or incorporating quantum science into the life sciences, and trying to understand what that landscape looks like for the future. And it was a really interesting workshop in that you know a lot of the themes that you've been talking about came up. A lot of issues arose, but also a lot of excitement around the ideas of possibly using new tools and technologies to study life systems. And it's particularly challenging because within the life sciences, there are only a few instances where quantum has been observed explicitly, so theoretically and then experimentally, including photosynthesis. But there's a number of times where it's been proposed that there's a possibility that quantum principles are in effect. So a lot of the things that came up during the workshop include bioelectromagnetism, or the use free radicals, which is kind of what helps some of what helps you heal as you're when you get injured. And so understanding and having those tools and technologies to be able to see if quantum concepts are actually involved in these processes is really important. And so then comes the challenge of being able to combine these two areas. So the folks in the life sciences and the folks who are in physics speak relatively different languages. Okay. And I think that that's a theme that keeps coming up no matter what convergence topic you're talking about. And for this one specifically, there are a lot of really extraordinary concepts, entanglement, tunneling, stuff like that, where exactly, where the folks in the life sciences may have heard of them, but typically haven't studied them. And so as we start to explain and talk about how these topics might be involved in life sciences and how we can use different technologies like quantum sensing technologies that rely on these concepts, there's some hesitancy. Some natural hesitancy, I would say, and so getting people to sort of come around to these ideas and start to incorporate them into their own research and their own thought process has been particularly challenging. And, as we've been talking over the past couple months, and particularly about quantum literacy and starting folks from an early age in just understanding basic quantum concepts, this is something that really struck home, and I saw a lot of parallels with the workshop that we did specifically. So this is just to say that, theoretically, if all of the folks involved in this workshop, and the research scientists and early career researchers as well, had been maybe more exposed to just the language around these topics, it would be a little less intimidating, and it would be a really exciting opportunity. And don't get me wrong, everyone is still excited about this. It's still an interesting topic to people.
And a hesitance just because.
And the communities, and because of that, the communities tend to not mesh as well sometimes, and there are lots of examples where there have been big successes in bringing these communities together. So don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that it is impossible, but it is a challenge.
Make sure we bring them that way.
Exactly. And so I think that those are just drawing the comparison and the ideas of creating a more quantum literate group of people that are coming up into research areas is quite an interesting concept. I think life sciences is actually a good case study for this. Yes. Because the life sciences, you have a group of people who are scientifically literate, and if maybe they just had a little more understanding and training in some in sort of a diverse group of areas, including some of these more physical and mathematical concepts, it would, they'd be able to incorporate them into their own work. And of course, we're seeing this already. It's prolifically happening, I would say, it's in all areas, including undergrad and graduate work. You see a lot of quantitative biology programs that are popping up, and this is all very exciting. I think that as we continue to move as the momentum of the field continues in that trajectory, so to speak, I think that we need to continue introducing concepts earlier and earlier, just to make sure people are aware and sort of ready to jump in. And I'll stop there for now.
No, don't you, Kavita, and then, because I've got lots of points that are hitting the same things that you were saying. But Kavita, please, go ahead.
So I'll take sort of a step back a little bit from the quantum workshop. As you already know, the Academies has engaged on convergence issues for many years and has produced several workshop reports, consensus reports, that sort of thing. For our board in particular, what we're noticing and what we're kind of wanting to build on is this sort of increasing awareness that transformative changes are in technology and therefore their applications and their capabilities are really sort of being enabled by these ability to kind of work across disciplinary boundaries. So in this case, biology or life sciences with computing, or with physics. We see in other fields, as you may know, in engineering biology or synthetic biology, we're talking about engineering and material science and so on. And so this sort of recognition that we have these multiple disciplines coming together in part to better understand how biology works, but also to be able to use the materials, the technologies, the tools that come out of biology or biological systems for some other purpose.
Absolutely.
And part of what's really interesting about what Stephen kind of described is that there's an opportunity for both in this particular subject area. And so being able to encourage that sort of critical thinking skills, the ability to look across the disciplines,
That's exactly
not
right.
only what you're trained in, but to hear, what others are trained in, how they solve problems, how they ask questions, what they mean at the conceptual level, not only at the semantic level, is really critical to then sort of saying, well, how do we solve this problem together?
Yes.
And if you can do that, then you'll be able to do some of these more convergent sort of activities. At least that's...
No, it's
That's
funny
our
you should
view.
say. No, that is funny you should say that, because I've been outlining a white paper saying that what we can do is use the scientific method as that grounding, because if we all agree on the approach and then we kind of come together, no matter what your skill, your education, your experience, if we have that grounding and we focus then, what's the hypothesis, where are we going, what are the tools that we have available, what are the assumptions that we are making, and each of them would come, the assumptions that I would make, not only from the research, but from the social science, from doing from a biodefense, but the social science, but the social network analysis, I'm going to have a set of assumptions. You're going to have a set, and then if we have the mathematicians, they're going to come. We pull them together, and we recognize that we then have a more robust approach.
I think that one of the when in talking to like a lot of experts around physical mathematical sciences, one person who I ended up talking to is an expert in AI and computing and automation, and one of the things that he said that I thought in response to a question related to specifically like how much should people know in order to apply what you do to their specific area, how much training do they need, he was very explicit about the fact that there are a set of people that need to have in-depth knowledge of how to write algorithms and produce machines that can do this kind of automation. But then everyone else should have a basic knowledge, but not enough so that they can do the in-depth research. It's just enough so that you can, as you were kind of saying, make decisions. So if you're thinking about your own research or your own set of areas that you're responsible for, how much knowledge do you need in order to make a decision about computing, about quantum? And as these technologies start to develop, I think, another thing that you brought up, getting people started early is really important. And one of the ways that you can maybe convince them is to start comparing the way that quantum is emerging to the way that computing was emerging, so many decades ago, because in that...
That's a great analogy to the computing to the quantum.
Because in that way, it really did... I mean, it was slow at first, but it really did spread like wildfire. So it was, you needed very little knowledge, and then all of a sudden it was extraordinarily helpful if you had some programming knowledge. And everyone who is now going through grade school and also college and graduate school have to do some computing. They have to have some knowledge in programming or development in order to be able to effectively accomplish essentially any task these days. So I think,
but they are also the group, the Gen Z. I'm not sure. They have grown up with technology. They are so comfortable with it. You can see babies, 18 months, 2 years old, if they see a phone, they know which button to push to call mommy or to play the game that they like to play.
Sure.
Well, actually, on that particular sort of specific topic, as you probably know very well, there are actually video games now that include whole things where you can create your own video game, and you can do sort of coding and things like that within that context. And increasingly, there are toys that allow kids to actually learn how to code. And so in thinking about how to get to, early stages of life and how to reach out particularly to underrepresented communities, to get them engaged and to get them sort of interested in careers in these fields, having to sort of think about how to embed these experiences in something that is accessible to different age groups and different communities is going to be hugely useful and important, and maybe have a side benefit of increasing, public perception of science.